Former President Trump chose a millennial junior senator from Ohio as his running mate for the 2024 presidential election. Hello, everybody. I'm Heather Hayes.
And I'm Steve Eager. It's 9 o'clock. J.D. Vance was an early critic of the former president, but has since turned into one of Trump's most ardent supporters. The announcement came in the opening hours of the Republican National Convention today, just 2 days after an attempt on Trump's life. Fox 4's David Centendry is in tonight with more. David.
And moments ago on Fox News, Senator Vance was asked about his past comments against Donald Trump. One of those comments was, quote, "I'm a never Trump guy."
I was certainly skeptical of Donald Trump in 2016, but President Trump was a great president, and he changed my mind. I think he changed the minds of a lot of Americans.
Taking a live look at the Republican National Convention, former President Trump has arrived. He is expected to take the stage any minute now, seen off the stage with a bandage on his ear. Just a few moments ago, again, 2 days after he was shot during an assassination attempt. Of course, there are many unanswered questions regarding the shooting investigation, but today a whole lot of focus is toward the vice presidential nominee.
It is therefore my honor to nominate Ohio Senator J.D. Vance for the office of Vice President of the United States of America.
Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio is chosen by former President Donald Trump as his vice presidential running mate.
He graduated summa cum laude from Yale Law School and is the author of the best-selling book Hillbilly Elegy.
The 39-year-old Marine who served in Iraq rose to fame in 2016 after the publication of his best-selling memoir, Hillbilly Elegy.
J.D. is a living embodiment of the American dream.
He knows what it's like to live in poverty, forgotten by Washington politicians.
Vance, however, was not always in Trump's corner. In 2016, Vance published an article in The Atlantic titled "Opioid of the Masses," in which he claimed Trump, quote, "can't fix America's growing social and cultural crisis." Vance, however, changed his tone when he decided to run as a Republican for U.S. Senate in Ohio, mirroring the former president's positions on foreign policy and immigration, as well as repeating Trump's claims of election fraud.
Let's rebuild prosperity for America's citizens and re-elect Donald J. Trump.
Monday afternoon, President Biden reacted to Trump's choice.
He's a clone of Trump on the issues. A clone of Trump on the issues. So I don't see any difference.
On Saturday, after the attempted assassination of Trump, Vance quickly pointed a finger at President Biden, stating on X, in part, "Today is not just some isolated incident. The central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs." The motive for Saturday's shooting remains unknown. At Monday's Republican National Convention, a moment of silence was held for the victims of Saturday's shooting.
To reflect on the terrible events that took place in Butler, Pennsylvania, and to pray for the victims and their families.
The RNC will continue throughout most of the week, with former President Trump expected to formally accept that nomination on Thursday. Steve, Heather, back to y'all.
All right, David Centendry in studio. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Milwaukee then. There is former President Trump, bandage on his right ear, standing next to his just nominated vice presidential running mate, J.D. Vance. And there is the Republican leader of the House. He will not likely say a word tonight. He is just standing next to his vice presidential candidate. He will speak Thursday evening after he accepts the nomination to be the Republican Party's candidate for president. This is a fluid event. It goes all week, and you see the president sometimes and you don't. Sometimes he appears, or the former president, and sometimes he doesn't. But it's a good week for all attendees. And there's the Republican presidential and vice presidential team that will go against President Biden and Kamala Harris for now.